I'm Jennifer Gilmour, and I'm an author and advocate for women in abusive relationships. I want to get to the answers to the questions that many have from those that work in the domestic abuse sector, getting an inside feel of what it's really like in their job role and sharing it with all of you. Right. Welcome everyone to the next #AbuseTalk interview, and I'm delighted to have the lovely Sue Penna with me today. You may remember her actually because we did a random, complete random recording of a conversation we had to do with the coronavirus outbreak, but in regards to what we can do as neighbours and as friends or, sort of in the area community members during lockdown, to sort of look for signs and symptoms really of what abuse would look like and sort of recognising. So you can have a look at that. I'll pop the link in the description so you can check that video out. It was only a 15-minute quick one, wasn't it, Sue? And we've made a blog post from it since, and I think people found it quite useful. So, but today, this is what we've been meaning to do for quite some time, but we've just never been able to get around to it. And obviously lockdown has given us all this time to be able to do those jobs. And I am honoured, to be honest, Sue, to have you on the podcast. As you know, it's a very personal part of my journey to have you involved. So I want to quickly read out a bit of background on Sue. I
don't know what's coming.
No, it's okay. Well, hopefully you've heard it before. But I just wanted to get everybody up to speed so everybody knows a bit about you. So I'm just going to read this. So in 2007, Sue wrote her first programme based on trauma-informed cognitive behavioural therapy, designed to provide support and assist the recovery of the women she was supporting. She felt that many existing services pigeonholed people as the damaged victims rather than offering them a pathway towards hope, empowerment and recovery. The programme developed into training for frontline staff to help support adults and children who had suffered domestic violence or other forms of abuse. And after 10 years delivering the programme, Sue felt there was still a huge audience that she was reaching. So ROCKPOOL was the solution. And ROCKPOOL, I'm sure many have heard about ROCKPOOL already because they're the main sponsor of #AbuseTalk. So I want to say a big thank you to that, that side of things. And it wouldn't really be able to run in the same way. So I think it's important now that Sue briefly sort of takes us a little further forward and tells us a bit about ROCKPOOL.
Oh, yeah, so ROCKPOOL, as you said, came about because, fundamentally, I started to think about wanting to retire. I mean, that sounds a bit daft, but I'd been traipsing around the country for over 10 years delivering Recovery Toolkit group training to people, and that was getting a bit tiring, just the travelling. And it suddenly dawned on me one day that if I stopped, then actually all those people that were already delivering the programme would get no further support with it, and that actually it would we wouldn't be training any new facilitators. I'd worked with Kirsty previously. She also had been made redundant from her work within a local authority, and we just thought, she's younger than me. We just thought, why don't we get together and look at how we could train more people, which is what we've done fundamentally. So we have a wonderful team of associates that do a lot of the training, but it's also given me opportunity to develop not just the book, which came about as a part of the domestic abuse toolkit, but also be able to focus on some work around adverse child experiences and sort of a bit more work around helping families who have had quite chaotic early lives as well. So that's ROCKPOOL. Yeah.
No, that's great. Thank you. So what was your original vision with ROCKPOOL, and are you fulfilling it now or still working towards fulfilling it?
I mean, COVID has got in the way, and so for us, it's a difficult time because most of our training, and fundamentally I believe it's the best sort of training is face-to-face and in rooms with people, because if we're healing, my theory being that, not just my theory, other people's theories, but the theory being that actually what individuals have experienced domestic abuse end up with is this thing that loosely is complex trauma. So the impact of the trauma leads people to have changed maybe the way they think about themselves and changed the way that they view the world. So one of the difficult things is that I think what we do with our talkers is we challenge people's traditional thinking about how you support people that have experienced domestic abuse. So we say, actually, you could do it a bit differently. And that's really important, that we're often in the room to do that. So we're having to think about, and we have done it with ROCKPOOL. Over 3 years, we've trained hundreds and hundreds of people, and it has been going really, really well. We're having to now think about how we might do that differently in the future. So it's a really challenging time, I think. Does that answer the question, Jennifer? We sort of are. We're going there. We're going to be okay, but it's just we're having to rethink things a bit.
Yeah, no, I think it is a case of adapting, isn't it? But as you say, in-person training and is very different, isn't it? And I mean, even doing Zoom calls in the day, you can just get exhausted from looking at a screen, and
it's just different sort of tiredness, isn't it? So I find these much more stressful than I do being in a room full of 100 people, because I think you can pick up the sense in the room when you're training people, and you can pick up the non-verbal cues and humour. I quite like using humour when I'm training. It doesn't work on Zoom in quite the same way, and people are sort of interrupting if you're a large group of people, so it's really difficult. But I think we have to be also realistic about how we access people in the future.
Well, I have asked people to send in questions around recovery, but before we go into them, I would like to find out what recovery means in terms of recovering from domestic abuse or trauma. So what would you say it looks like? What's the outcome?
I think for me, it looks like just being able to get on with your life, really. And I think that's what, taking, because my background is sort of a bit in mental health and a bit in DV, taking that and looking at it from which I do really believe it is complex trauma. And for so many, many, many years, women and men get misdiagnosed and mislabeled and written off and treated as they were actively making choices. Well, you're not actively making choices when your whole thought processes are altered by the conditioning and the brainwashing that you're going through as part of the abuse. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's people like yourself, Jennifer. It's those emails I get from people saying they're back at work, they've got a new relationship that's healthy, they're having fun with the kids, they're learning a new skill. It's people being able to free that voice and people being able to just have the lives they're entitled to.
Yeah,
I think I don't know. That's not a technical description of recovery, but that's what it means for me.
No, I think that's what's important, because when you probably look at the terminology of recovery, people are thinking of maybe everything's gone in the past. That you're completely healed, and that's not necessarily my view on it. I would say that you put things into place to be able to take steps forward, and to be able to have times of happiness and it not consume you. But I think there is this thing around social media about you sort of go through a program and you come out completely a different person. For me, that's that's not how it is it? And that's not how we should sell it.
I think if you've had trauma, which is how I view this, then it doesn't go away. In fact, it becomes and can inform part of the new you. When you're in it and it feels rotten and it is horrible, it's hard to imagine that. But I think that I hope what we do in our programs is we help people put that in a box somewhere, that trauma. It doesn't mean when we're not stressed or triggered or worried that will rear its head, but what we give people is some techniques so that they can go, oh, that's that. It's opened the lid. I'm going to put the lid back on it again, because I think that's the skill that's not taught. So it becomes overwhelming for people if if they get symptoms again, or they get to feel distressed, or they start to hear the voice of the perpetrator, what they think is that they're not all right. But you are all right. These things just will always come up in lives. They're sort of part of what forms the fabric of our personality.
Yeah.
But we can adapt so that we're managing them rather than the symptoms are managing us.
Yeah, I like that. That pretty much sums it up for me, really.
Yeah.
No, thank you. So let's get into some of these questions. And I know you've seen a couple of the questions. I've received messages with some in as well. So, how do you recover when your abuser has your children and abuses them as well?
I think this is an incredibly difficult position. I think what also that question alludes to is a bit of the the post-separation abuse that goes on. Because what we know is that even when families are separated, that the perpetrator will use the children or the courts or whatever mechanisms they've got to stop somebody and to continue to abuse somebody, because they haven't won, so they're still trying to find their position. I think recovery, as I've just described it to you in those terms, is really, really difficult at that point. I think you're still at the point where this is happening, where actually you're recording everything that happens, you're making sure that you keep a diary of events, that you're collecting your evidence about what that you can do. You find yourself a good advocate. You try and link in with the domestic abuse services in your area that can support you. And I think it's incredibly difficult when you witness your children being hurt by somebody who. I remember working with somebody once who the only solution to it was not to see their children. That to actually, because every time they saw their children, that made it more difficult for them with the person they were living with, who was the primary abuser.
Yeah, and it's.
I don't know. I think this is one of those. I don't know that there's a. I think all you can do is make yourself as healthy as possible in that situation. So there is a need to think about your self-care and your eating and making yourself as strong as possible to be there for your kids when you can be, and being as strong as you can be without taking on the perpetrator. Because if you take on the perpetrator, it will exacerbate it.
Yeah,
I mean, in the instant of handing over children or anything, that's what I mean. I don't mean you shouldn't go down criminal proceedings. I mean, actually, when you have to have contact or when you're having contact.
Yeah. I mean, they have recognised, because the next question went on, which you've kind of covered, is the recovery during extended and relentless post-separation abuse. So obviously recognising that that's what's happening. And perhaps it's that there's not, I don't know, that support, or they're trying to find it, which I think is quite difficult. I don't know how you feel about it. I think it's different when you are looking for advice or services, but the amount of times that I've had to signpost somebody to a local service because they can't find it, or it's almost like you have to really search for that kind of information or get the right support, because not always will one service be the right fit, if that makes sense. So I find that quite difficult as well.
And I think there is amongst a lot of agencies this myth about if you're separated, it's stopped and it's over. We know it's the most dangerous time, that actually people that have left abusive relationships are more at risk of being hurt at that time, so it's really dangerous. And there's this mythology that the abuse stops, and the abuse does not stop, particularly when there's children. And I know that there's been lots of stuff, particularly on Twitter recently, about the family courts, and I'm not an expert in the family courts, and I wouldn't purport to be, but I know from reading all the anecdotal stuff and reading people's Twitters and blog posts that family courts seem to have very little understanding about what abusive behaviour is, and make all sorts of really bizarre decisions about who has children and who children have to see. They don't really listen to the voice of the child, I don't think. I'm not sure that's a politically correct thing to have said, but that fundamental safeguarding children requires us to listen to the voice of the child. But I have to say that quite often neither the family courts or CAFCAS listen to the voice of the child. Children clearly saying they don't want to go with one parent, they don't want to be with one parent. And what's really alarming is that in recent years we've had this growth of this thing called parent alienation syndrome. I don't know where I know where it came from. It came from America. There is no evidence for parent alienation syndrome. It doesn't exist. It was set up by somebody who had their own gripe to, I think it's going to be like years ago when I was working in therapy, there was this thing called false memory syndrome. And I worked a lot with adults that had been sexually abused as children. And there was this false memory syndrome thing. It's not true. We as therapists were putting ideas in people's heads. We were creating it. There was no such thing. It was going to court. People were losing cases about childhood abuse because of false memory syndrome. And only last year, the whole thing's been discredited, completely discredited. But you'll still hear people talking about it because it's dripped into that mythology of sexual abuse work that it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And I think
it's quite dangerous, isn't it, really?
It's really dangerous, Jennifer. And I think the same is going to happen with parent alienation syndrome, because I think there are some parents who have, without domestic abuse or for whatever reason, don't want their children to see the other person. Maybe they have an affair with a friend of theirs or, whatever. And that's wrong. But children do have the right to see both parents. Not when there's violence and abuse going on.
Yeah, and I mean, I think even if they did listen to the child's voice, it's not always clear, is it? Because there are going to be children that are concerned that this information gets back to the perpetrator, and then they're scared to even share. And it's recognising those signs as well. And clearly the systems aren't equipped with that.
And what a child, same as a parent, will do, because of the conditioning of living in an abusive relationship, a child will look pleased to see the person that's hurting them, because what that child is doing is trying to protect themselves. So what I know is, I'm 8 years old, and what I know is, if I don't look pleased to see the person that hurts mum and me, is they will hurt me. So I'm going to look thrilled to see them, because that's what they want to see, and I'll do what they want. And that is so often misinterpreted by people that work with those children as they're fine, they're quite happy.
And it's true, and this needs talking about more, really, doesn't it? Right.
What I would say to that caller is, and I'm not trying to flog my book, but actually, if you are post-abuse but you're still experiencing that abusive relationship, post-abuse, this can help, because there are some techniques in the toolkit book that will give you some inner strength a bit more, or build you up a bit more to be able to manage what's happening. I think. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. I was going to move on to anyway. You're too good. Moving ahead. So I've had a few questions from one person. So I'm just going to try and read out the full message, because I think it brings everything. So hopefully you'll be able to focus on this too.
I might just take some notes. What I've learned doing Zooms is that I don't have a very good memory. And I was on a local TV station, and they were asking things, and I'm thinking, oh, that's really important, I must mention that in a minute when they ask me, and then they asked me and I forgot. So jot some things down. No,
that's no problem. So I'm 22 and been in a relationship for 3 years and lived with that person as well until December. So it was very toxic and abusive, and I didn't know that at the time. Had to hide it all the time. So now I'm alone, and that's fine. So I think this person is obviously very confused and upset. But my question is, how do you stop caring about him after the relationship ends? And I don't mean romantically or whatever, because that's not the case anymore. I mean, how do I stop caring and worrying about what he's doing and who will be the next one? And what if somebody else goes through it? So can you break that one?
I mean, I think I'm well done for, getting out and moving on and recognising the romantic bit, because I think that can catch people sometimes too. I think that part of the reason we often end up caring about somebody, if I look at it from two perspectives, one is that we don't start these relationships because we don't care, or we don't fall in love. If they were abusive and toxic at the beginning, we wouldn't go back for the second date. So I hope. So what happens is we fall in love with somebody, and that person is wonderful, and sometimes it happens just because we're at a vulnerable point in our life, so they feel even more vulnerable because we're a bit messy at the time, or something's happened to us, and this person's come along and they're wonderful and kind. What happens in the process of the abuse, though, as it develops, is that they sort of start to make us responsible for the way they feel. So they sort of start to say things like, when something goes wrong, or when they're angry, or when they are controlling, that they wouldn't have to do it if we were different. It's your fault I have to. I'm only doing this for you. It's your fault that I have to do these things. And part of our head is like, well, that's not true, but it's a real struggle. You're saying it is, I don't think it is, but I love you, and maybe you are right. And what happens is it changes the way that we think, and we start to feel that we're the person that is responsible for the abuse, that we're the person that's responsible for what's happening. And actually we're responsible for them, because if it wasn't for us, they would be less tired, less stressed, less emotional, drink less, take less drugs, because they're telling us all the time that that's part of the reason they're doing these things, is a way of managing us if we upset them. So it's really common to leave a relationship that's been abusive and still feel hooked in that way, to that that somehow we could have helped them, we could have rescued them. So some individuals that are abusive because they know no better, and I do believe that if they've grown up with trauma in their own childhood, if resolving the trauma in their childhood was by violence or controlling people, they're actually just they're hurt themselves. And I think there's a theory that says that we respond to that hurt child in them, that we want to make them better. And you hear women say that all the time. If only I could help them because they hurt too, and it's not their fault. But you can't do that. The only person that can change that at the end of the day is by them deciding they don't want to be like that anymore, and they can change it. So I think the only thing you can do about stopping worrying about them is just keep saying to yourself, the responsibility lies with them, the responsibility lies with them. Whether they'll do it next time, reality is, what we know is that, perpetrators do go on to the next relationship and do it again. But there's nothing you can do about that. Sometimes you can, if you've reported it to the police, then the police have some evidence. But you can't be responsible for what someone does to the next person.
Yeah. She's gone on to ask, and I mean, I know the answer to this, but would it be my fault for not speaking up and protecting the next person? And should I warn anyone new?
It's not your fault. The abuse lies solely with the person that's being abusive. I think that's a real guilt trip that's put on women particularly. If you don't report this, if you don't do something about it, then you'll be equally culpable for the next person. And that really, really, really isn't true. I think in terms of reporting, it's, it can be terrifying going to the police. The police may not take any action. I mean, it's worth talking possibly to, if you can find your local support service, if you're not already involved with them, because they can provide intelligence to the police about people. But it isn't your responsibility. And I think people feel, if you're in that confused position where you're worrying about him but also worried about who he might hurt, it's a conflict. It's a real conflict between what to do. I would go on, Jennifer. What were
she's asked quite a lot of questions, but one of the things that I think is probably linked to the sort of the recovery aspect is she's asking, how do I even stop thinking about the next step? Steps he's making, like who he's going to meet. So clearly she's feeling that this is what she's thinking about, and she's really concerned, and obviously gone through an experience that she doesn't want anyone else to go through. So how does she even switch off from that?
It's really challenging. I mean, one of the ways to do that is to report it, is to find a friend to go with you and go to the police station and tell them about it and give them that intelligence. They may choose to act on that, they may not. I think there is a thing called Clare's Law now, where people can, if the police have got the intelligence, we can phone up and ask the police, I've got a new boyfriend, are they known to anybody? Yeah. So, you would be providing somebody with it. I think the other thing, though, is that because of the myths that are around about abuse, I'm trying to think how to say this. I think it's really hard to tell someone that that's what's going to happen, because also other women will just say, well, he won't do it to me.
Yeah.
Do it to me, do it to you, won't do it to me.
I mean, and I've been in that situation where I felt, that responsibility to warn. I've never done it. Thankfully, I've got friends that have said, just don't get involved, and probably the best thing I could have done, because really you're putting yourself more at risk, aren't you?
The best way to do it, if you're going to do it, is through the legal procedure, or through a support, not
yourself.
Wander up to someone in a pub and say, do you know he's, because you don't know what situation that would put him in with you, and it put you at risk, but also the chances are of somebody believing you, they'll just see you as the ex-girlfriend that's got sour grapes. Yeah,
and they're potentially being, they've gone through that beginning part of, I think, if I can think about it as what I was like at the beginning of the relationship and how it was, there's no really evidence that any of that's going to happen, and you wouldn't necessarily believe it, and maybe you're recruited into the system anyway. So it is really difficult. As you've touched on, you've recently published a self-help book, which is an adapted version of the 12-week Recovery Toolkit program. Mm-hmm. So I've got it here, and you've got it there. There it is. So what are the differences between the going on the program as a person and reading the self-help book?
Okay. I as I briefly touched on, my training is as an occupational therapist, and I was really, really lucky in my sort of clinical career to spend a lot of time working in groups with people. And I just think the power of working with other people that have been through the same experience of you is phenomenal. So what the group is very much about, as you've experienced, Jennifer, it's not talking about what's happened to you in the past, because it's a trauma-informed model. It's about moving forward with positive techniques and strategies. There's too much emphasis, I believe, in allowing people to continually talk about the trauma, and all the evidence is that the more you talk about the trauma, actually it just opens trauma pathways in your brain and makes it more difficult to shut them down, and it's not helpful when working with trauma. It's the opposite effect, really. So I think there's something about being in a group with other people, of shared experience, of looking around a room and going, Jesus, it wasn't just me this happened to. This was, and the same process has happened to all of us. The same things have happened to us. We've been groomed into these relationships. The same things happened, and there are some roots out of it. So I think that is for me the best thing. But the reality is, there are men and women out there who have left relationships a long time ago and never going to contact an agency, but are just left with some niggles about what happened to them. The book is useful for that. I think it's also, even if you might have just left an abusive relationship and not have access to services, and the book will be helpful. I think the book is helpful for family and friends as well, to understand why, to undo some of those myths about why you behaved the way you did when you were in that abusive relationship. I'd hope to maybe professionals, because I think there's an awful lot of professionals out there that don't understand the dynamics of abuse. They see it in a very sort of linear way. You're in that relationship, then you're out of it, and everything should be all right now. And they have no idea of the coercion and control, the impact that has on people's mental health. So I think and I think you might read the book and then want to go on a group, or you might go on a group and want the book as a top up after. It just felt like, particularly in this time when we're not running groups, just really weird. I've been writing it for years and never really publishing it. Get it out over COVID.
No, it's definitely good timing, and I think I've seen that there's been some groups that have had to stop part way, so they've been able to then give the book to the women that were part way through the groups, which is at least that's something to keep them going, because
Yeah.
when you're in the group, you kind of look forward to
Yeah.
that next week as you go along, and it's kind of like a momentum that builds. Is how I felt anyway. So
we're certainly also looking at how we could put for some of the groups online, so some agencies that are really experienced in running it, we're going to do some pilot work with them around, can we run this group via Zoom? Because we know, none of us know how long we're going to be locked down, or if another lockdown will happen in 12 months' time. We live in unprecedented times, really.
I suppose if I remember, back to coming out of that relationship, and I didn't go on to the programme until about 9 months after, and I just didn't have any friends, and I didn't trust anyone to make friends, and so I still think it would have been beneficial, having it online. And I'm just thinking about, the situation of lockdown, that people could have fled that relationship before, and now they're even more isolated and don't have that conversation.
And I think there's a real worry about one. I think we talked about this before, but one is that the isolation of COVID can be triggering for people, so it can set all that stuff off. And the other is that this is a real time for your perpetrator to try and come back and charm you again. Because if you're feeling low, and I think, own it myself, this is a struggle. I have some days when I think, yay, this is a good day, and there are other days where I don't want to move off my sofa. Because it feels that oppression of confinement.
Yeah,
definitely. And I live in a lovely part of the world, and I don't have small kids to look after, and I can walk out anywhere. But I think it's weird, it is having different effects on people, and that's okay. But if you've just left an abusive relationship and you're having one of those vulnerable days, and up pops your ex-abuser going, "Oh, we could do it this time. It'll be all right. I won't do that again."
Yeah. Or offer the help, if I'm thinking
I'll take
of
the kids off for a bit. Yeah, I'll cook tea tonight.
Well, obviously, we've spoken a bit about recovery, answered some of those questions, and for me, it's quite clear on the recovery process now, sort of coming good through the program, and being years down the line. But do you think that there is a certain stage of their people's journey after abuse that they should be going on to the program? Because I think as soon as you come out of a relationship, I'm not sure you'd be able to maybe.
Well, it's interesting, Jennifer, because when we first wrote it, it got piloted. It was funded by Job Centre Plus in Cornwall. It was part of a getting people back to work thing, and quite a few did. But we evaluated it, and when I trained the first bunch of facilitators, I said to them, the thing is, you need to, because there's an interview process before you come on the program anyway, which is part of the trauma-informed model. So I said to them, do not take referrals from the IDVAs. Now, as you and other people might know, IDVAs, Independent Domestic Violence Advisors, work with very high-risk families. So they're working with the families that have just fled, that are being chased after, that are in real, really high risk. Don't take them from the IDVAs, I said, because those, and we've piloted it with women. This program is run with men and women, but initially we piloted with women. Because those women will be too chaotic, it will be too raw, they'll have too much going on, and they won't manage to come for 12 weeks. So just don't take them. So, of course, they ignored me completely, the and they allowed the IDVAs to refer. And when we looked at the attendance, those women didn't drop out any more than any other women.
Right.
So it completely blew me, because I was wrong. It's an individual thing. I don't think we can say. So it might not have been right for you. Some women straight out of an abusive relationship, it will be fine for. Which is why, and obviously we can't do this with the book because anyone can buy the book, which is why in the group program, everybody gets an interview first, just so they know. So it's part of making people safe, so they know what's going to happen, and so they can make a choice about it. Because what we never ever want the program to be is something that people are sent on to get well.
Yeah,
we give them the information about the program and they choose.
No, that's perfect. No, thank you. So obviously the self-help book came out like last week, the week before. What's everyone's reactions been to it so far?
I've had some great feedback on Amazon. People seem to like it. We've had a whole range of people that have shown an interest in it, from people that have been on the programs and want to top up to people that don't. I'm on local radio talking about it on Thursday. And we're just sort of we're doing a really soft market approach, because we don't have the mechanisms at ROCKPOOL to do a sort of a hard market approach, whatever that is. I don't know. I don't know how many copies, but I think sales are increasing.
That's great. And I think the thing that stands out for me with it is that the word that pops out in my head is that it's accessible, because there's been so many people that have asked me, what program have I been on? I've told them, and then I've looked in the area and it's not available. And that's down to the local organisations and authorities, or even for me, I'm in Hull. So because I'm in Hull, I accessed it. But if I literally left the border, which is half a mile down the road in East Yorkshire, the council there, I wouldn't have been able to go on to it, because it wouldn't
what really frustrates me with it, Jennifer, is obviously we have to charge for people to come on the training, to become facilitators, because we have to make a living. What I'd really like, in my dreams, big lottery would give me a bunch of money, and we could just go and train people across the country to deliver the program, and that would be like amazing, because it does work. It does work, and it's the only program I think that uses this trauma model with people and gives people what they need to recover and move forward, whatever that is for them.
So we'd probably say that it's like a trailblazer, isn't it? That you're the setter of the trauma side of it, really, because you don't see that. I see more awareness.
You're seeing more people talking about trauma, and suddenly everyone's starting to think that they're becoming an expert in it, which alarms me a little bit. But yeah, I've just been, like I say, I spent 10 years toddling around the country. For me, the thing that evidences the effectiveness of this program is, one, that people come back and for training for their organisation. So once they're running it, when staff leave or new staff come, they send them on the training because they believe in the program and they see such amazing results with the program. And that, for me, indicates that it works. It does work. Otherwise, they wouldn't do that. They would stop running it. And we have got, I said to you about trying to put the program online, maybe, and we just put out a very quick call for partners to come and work with us on that. And within 24 hours, I had enough people to work with. And they're, and we wouldn't have had that if it didn't work, it would be hard, we didn't have to persuade anybody to come and work with us on it. They just went, yes, please,
Well, Sue, how do people find you online? If anybody wants to ask you a question or get in touch with you personally, how can people find you?
They can find me via our website, or my email is sue@rockpool.life. It's hard for me to respond to individuals, partly because I don't know the whole history of things, and I don't practice I'm not a practicing counsellor or therapist anymore, so I can't get involved in individual things. But what I would say is we can signpost, or people can have a look at our resources. We've got loads of resources online people can download and have a look at. There's a link through to the book. And we're happy to do that. I just don't want people to feel that I could actually take them on and help them.
No, of course.
I don't have that ability.
No, I completely agree. But I just want to say anyway, a massive thank you for answering the questions. Obviously, yours and ROCKPOOL's work changes people's lives. I wouldn't be doing what I do today without going on the programme myself and raising awareness this way. So if anybody hasn't heard about my journey with ROCKPOOL and how I've sort of changed my life. You can have a look. I'll pop the link in the description to a video that I've recorded in the past, and you can check that out. It was a bit of an emotional recording, that one. And I also want to thank everybody that sent in questions. If you did have any further questions, pop them to me and I can always forward them to Sue. I'm sure that the self-help book, though, would be one thing to read, especially during lockdown. And I think that will answer many people's questions in terms of the recovery and the process. So thank you once again, Sue. I will let you go.
You're welcome. You are welcome. It's lovely. Always lovely to speak to you, Jen, and see
you.
Oh.